Be the Talk, episode 207, featuring Heather Bischoff. Welcome to Be the Talk. We go behind the talk 7 days a week for tips and techniques to help you change the world. I'm Nathan Eckel, and a talker myself, I'm interviewing others who change the world with their talk. You can too, even if you've never given a talk before. Let's get started with today's show. We are live with Heather Bischoff. Heather, are you ready to talk?
I am ready to talk, Nathan.
Heather Bischoff is a fresh voice for companies seeking higher employee engagement and retention. As a thought leader with over 15 years in organizational management, Heather aligns companies and their people with their core values and sustainable business models. Heather has an innovative leadership style, managing teams across the United States in both on-site and virtual environments, maintaining high retention. A highly skilled mediator who points companies in the right direction, building bridges between leadership and the skilled workforce. Heather Bischoff, welcome to the talk.
Thanks for having me, Nathan.
Now, your talk is called How Asking the Right Question Can Change Your Life. And man, isn't that the case where we are today? The questions we ask determine the quality of the answers that we get, and really can make the difference between us zigzagging, spinning around in circles, or actually charting a course to success. What I love about your talk is that you get very authentic and personal. You also dive into some data about belief systems. And then finally, you kind of tie the whole thing together and let people know the power of asking the right questions in terms of steering your life and many other companies to where they are today. So please, Heather, take us behind the talk.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, the talk is definitely a passion project of mine, because of my own personal experience and just looking at, how do people overcome obstacles and how do they, get to achieve a life that they want to have. And there's so many people who will say, oh, well, that's a pipe dream, or I can't have that because of X, Y, Z. And, I'm living proof that that is not the case. So for me, this was really, the hardest part of putting this together was my research on belief. Belief is, it's very subjective. So it's kind of, how do you prove one's belief? And finding the research from Boston University was such a huge help in my case, and making the case for, hey, this is a real thing. And Boston University did a study on this, and, our beliefs really are something that come from something greater than ourselves. And they're there before we're ever, brought into this world.
So it's not nurture, it's nature, in other words.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Now, this is probably normally a blitz round question, but I love that you had the data, because a couple things it did. Number one, it gave us some data. Number two, it made it a lot less subjective, and less about Heather, much more about the ideas that you were presenting out there. So Talk Universe, whenever you get the opportunity to include real data in your presentation, it's going to make you look good as a candidate, and it's going to make you look good once you're accepted and giving the talk. My question to you, Heather, is that something that you had put into your proposal for the talk, or is that something that other people encouraged you to fortify your talk with?
That's also a great question, Nathan. I had the opportunity of working with a speaking coach who had actually said, you need to have data. And that was probably the hardest thing for me, because it's not the norm for me. I'm much more of an extemporaneous speaker, and finding the data and then really dwindling down, pages and pages and pages of this research project to, kind of come up with the points was challenging for me. But I also agree with you. It made a big impact in the actual talk.
Yeah. I mean, isn't it a pain? On the one hand, on the front end, it's a pain to do all the research, or it can be a pain. Some people love the data, but then they struggle. Those types of people struggle with the authenticity and, bringing people behind your life and sharing, the vulnerable things. And so it can be a pain, but I mean, I watch your talk and I'm like, wow, this is great. They have some data here. Heather's bringing some data. She's tying it all together. This is a great talk. So, I mean, I love what you close with. I love that quote, God doesn't make junk. I love this whole idea of we really have to believe in ourselves. Even if bad things happen to us, even if we do things that maybe, are regretful, or things happen to us that are regretful, we can always choose, and we can always choose to have a high view of ourselves and rise above some of these challenges. So really, what went in behind your talk? Why did you choose to talk about this as opposed to, management or some of the other amazing things that you do, Heather?
For me, without the belief, nothing else really matters, because life really is about choices. And so whether you're talking about managing your team in a corporate environment, or changing your, relationship, or, relationship with your kids, parenting, all sorts of things, it's all about choices. And if you don't really understand what you believe or why you believe what you believe, there's huge implications to that. And I've worked with so many people who will say, I can't do this. And I will ask them, well, who told you that, or why? And a lot of times they don't know, or, you just ask people just different questions about what they're saying and what they believe. And when you ask them, where did that come from? And again, like, I did this for myself, and just looking at, why do I believe these things about culture, society, myself, work, all those types of things. And when I started to, pull the layers, away, I realized that those were not my beliefs at all. Those were beliefs that were passed down to me from all sorts of people. And if it's my life, then I get to choose what I believe and what I don't believe.
Well, and the powerful thing right there, Heather, it just ties right back into your talk, because all the things, the fundamental things that the Boston University study discovered was all nature beliefs, things that are hardwired into us. And I love how you kind of flirted with the idea that we're spiritual beings. You didn't really, try to scientifically prove that, which I don't know how you scientifically prove that. So good for you for kind of flirting with the idea. And I love how all of the nurture, I don't even want to say the nurture beliefs, because they weren't nurturing beliefs. They were harming beliefs. Those were all things that you realized that you picked up along the way, that I picked up along the way, that we all pick up along the way. So I love how, the real direction of your talk and the things that you have in there really support one another in a very powerful way. Anything, and am I just discovering that, or did you work, behind the scenes, rather purposefully to make sure that they all lined up in that way?
No, I did not. That was
you did not.
No, I just worked, I had a speech that I tried to draft it. It's the funny story is I was asked to do the talk in February and could not think of anything. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to talk about? What am I going to talk about? And then I had the privilege of going to Julia Child's country home in Provence, France in July.
Oh my.
And was feeling so inspired. And so that's kind of where I wrote the speech. And then, in September, which was like a month before the talk, had an opportunity, a friend, kind of connected me with a speech coach who kind of looked over it and essentially had me rewrite the whole thing, which was very, very alarming. And so, he was just like, this is such a good and important topic. Like, it just needs to be, really succinct. And so he gave me some pointers, and it was probably a week before the talk that I actually had it finalized. And I used the research as the core to just kind of tie all of the personal things in, essentially.
We've been enjoying this conversation with Heather Bischoff. Her talk is called How Asking the Right Questions Can Change Your Life. And what a fun delving behind the talk we're having. We're going to be right back with Heather Bischoff in just a moment in the Blitz Round. People ask, how could I start a 7-day-a-week podcast? It's because of what I've learned from my mentors. Some of the best mentors in history aren't around anymore. They've left hours of one-on-one mentoring behind in their books. Each month at Classics on Tap, I record a new chapter from a classic business book to help you make a difference. Download your first chapter at classicsontap.com. And we're back. It's the Blitz Round, and we are ready to rock. Heather Bischoff, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, so I'm going to add my own Blitz Round question. You just told us in the last segment that you had to right your entire speech. Are you glad that you did that or not?
I am glad that I did that.
Why?
Well, because it was so much more, learning how to do this, TED Talk is so different than doing any other kind of speaking that I do. And TED Talks are really about storytelling. If I would have gone with my first version, it would have been way more focused on me and people probably would have been bored out of their minds versus, adding in the research and focusing it really around the research and what the research said made for a much more compelling story.
Talk Universe, I want you to pay attention to that. Making the talk about the research and your own story fortifies and makes it so interesting because it's not all about that person. So, powerful thing. Heather, are you a memorizer, an improviser, or a blender?
I would say that I'm a blender. I will definitely concur to Bogomil, and how he, normally I am very, extemporaneous, just kind of go off the cuff. But for this particular talk, I really wanted it to be right on point and polished. So I did memorize it because it was too important not to.
Now, you walk out on stage, Heather. Did you have nerves or were you in the zone or neither or both?
I was in the zone, Nathan.
In the zone? What does that feel like?
It feels incredible to me. I loved it. It was amazing and would absolutely do it again in a heartbeat. My endorphins get going and I'm just like, yes, we're on fire.
What's a tip, technique, or a tool that helped you get in the zone and stay in the zone?
So I made a playlist on my my music, essentially. That was just music that was going to pump me up and really inspire me. So while I was sitting in the audience, I was listening to this music that was just getting me all fired up. And so that's what I did.
Oh, I have a name for that. I call that and it comes from, I think the last Olympics, who was it? Michael Phelps, the Michael Phelps, stare. If you remember that meme where he was listening to something and he had a terror look of, terror, not of being personally afraid, but that everybody else seeing that look would be filled with terror because that was an intense look. What is the most painful part of your talk that you actually had to cut out?
So it's not necessarily something that had to cut out, but something that most people don't know is the schedule was printed incorrectly for the TEDx event that day, and I had people coming from all over to attend my talk, and they were actually running about an hour and a half ahead of schedule. So I did my talk, and probably about 20 minutes after I did my talk, my guests arrived. And so the cool thing though, is that I was able to kind of, cause people were so upset and really disappointed. And I went to the organizer and just said, hey, would it be possible for me to do it again? And they said, yes. So I actually did my talk twice that day.
Wow.
So that my guests could hear it.
Okay. Well, Talk Universe, that's great that worked. I don't know that works in every situation, but I'm really glad that worked. We've been enjoying the Blitz round with Heather Bischoff, and in just a moment, we're going to pivot over to the final word of advice. But before we do, we want to let you know where we can go to actually watch her excellent talk. How asking the right question can change your life. You can go to our show notes page at BeTheTalk.com. And if you want to connect with Heather, you can go to dragonflydirection.com, dragonflydirection.com. And in a moment, we'll be right back with Heather Bischoff and the final word of advice. Everyone wants to change the world, but not everyone knows the first step. Before you can change the world with your talk, it has to be selected. So grab the templates, timelines, and tools that I use to get my talk selected at BeTheTalk.com. And we're back. It's time for the final word of advice for all of us in Talk Universe.
My final advice would be this: life is now, and we all have choices to make. So rather than wait for later or wait until all of your circumstances are in order, just, leap and the net will appear.
Heather Bischoff, thank you so much for coming on the talk today and sharing your wisdom with Talk Universe.
Thank you, Nathan.
Thanks for listening to Be the Talk. For tips and resources to help you change the world, go to BeTheTalk.com. See you tomorrow.